Hello, welcome to Enna's video on reasonable adjustments. This video will help you understand what reasonable adjustments are, how they can help you, what some examples of reasonable adjustments are, and how you can ask for reasonable adjustments in both the recruitment process and the workplace. So what are reasonable adjustments? A reasonable adjustment under the Equality Act 2010 is a change that must be made to remove or reduce a disadvantage related to an employee's disability when doing their job, a job applicant's disability when applying for a job. So you might be wondering, I am neurodivergent, do reasonable adjustments apply to me? Legally, under the Equality Act, employees must take positive steps to remove the barriers you face due to your neurodiversity. This is to ensure you receive the same treatment as far as this is possible as someone who isn't neurodivergent. This can involve the removal of physical barriers, a change in the working environment, extra support, or changing the way your job is structured. Neurodivergent people must be treated fairly in applying for jobs, and once in employment, they must be given the same opportunities. How could reasonable adjustments help me? So you might be thinking, I'm neurodivergent, how can reasonable adjustments help me? Reasonable adjustments are there to make sure you are not disadvantaged because of your neurodivergence in the recruitment process or in the workplace. For example, in the recruitment process, during the interview stage, it's important that neurodivergent candidates experience a level playing field compared to a neurotypical candidate, those that aren't neurodivergent. Interviews can be very difficult for everyone, but when you are neurodivergent, this can be even more challenging. Some interview questions can be difficult to answer as they may require you to talk about your experiences and can catch you off guard. This is where reasonable adjustments come into place. You can request that questions are phrased differently in a manner that are easier for you to understand. However, in order for you to get reasonable adjustments, you must inform HR or your interviewer beforehand. This is where disclosing that you are neurodivergent is important because you can explain that you need adjustments in place to bring your best self to the interview. Reasonable adjustments can also help someone neurodivergent in the workplace. They are there to ensure you are treated in a fair manner and that adjustments are put in place to help alleviate the challenges that can come with being neurodivergent. By recognising potential challenges in the workplace, you can then work with your manager to develop a solution to enable you to thrive in the workplace, which may mean you are less stressed and can do your very best at work. It is important to remember that employees are legally required to put adjustments in place. What are some examples of reasonable adjustments? So this section is to give you some real-life examples of what reasonable adjustments are and how these can be put in place. So you are neurodivergent and you might have one or more of the following conditions: autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia. And you might find that in the office, you find that meetings are really overwhelming for you and you find it difficult to sit there for long periods of time and concentrate, and you find that the social situation is all a bit too much for you. You might also find that a lot of your colleagues give you information overload, giving you too much information at once, and the information is not always easy to read, and you may struggle to grasp what is the main points. You also might struggle with a lot of sensory overload. You might find that the office is too bright with all the lights and that there are a lot of smells coming from the kitchen, and also that there are a lot of unexpected noises such as fire alarms. And you find all of this gives you a lot of distress and could cause you to become overloaded with your senses. So these were examples of some of the difficulties you may have being neurodivergent, and this is where you would ask for some reasonable adjustments to be put in place to help alleviate some of these challenges. For example, you would ask to only attend essential meetings and ask for notes from other meetings to be typed up and sent to you. And you would ask that information would be given in a clear, concise manner and that it is easily readable. And you would ask to be sat away from any bright lights, away from the kitchen, and preferably choose your space to work in that causes you the least sensory disturbance. And also to be warned of any noises such as fire alarms that may take place, and to come up with solutions to this, such as maybe leaving the building when this takes place. These were examples of some of the adjustments that you can ask for some of the difficulties you may have with being neurodivergent. So, how do I ask for these reasonable adjustments? So, you've decided that you want some reasonable adjustments, but you're not sure how to ask or approach the subject. Here we have created a simple 5-step process on the steps to asking for reasonable adjustments. Step 1. Finding the right contact point. So you might be tempted to pick up the phone and discuss all your reasonable adjustments over the telephone. Whilst yes, this can be a really good starting point, we should advise against verbalising the adjustments over telephone, as you won't have any evidence of this in future should issues arise. Picking up the telephone and asking who is the main contact point to speak to about adjustments is a great way to ensure that you email the correct person. It might be as simple as this. Your first contact point may be a recruitment coordinator, and you may wish to inform them that you require reasonable adjustments for your interview. And you might provide them a PDF document with these requests. And then they may pass this information on to the management team who will be conducting the interview. Or sometimes you might be referred on to the HR department or the occupational health department. This all depends on the company's procedures. Step 2. Thinking about your challenges and why you need reasonable adjustments. It is very useful to spend some time thinking about what your challenges are in relation to interviews and what you find helps alleviate some of these challenges. For example, you might think about previous interviews that you've had and the feedback you have received from them. For example, you might have received feedback in the past that your answers were not detailed enough, and you have then realised this is because you have not grasped the main point of the question because you cannot read between the lines. This is then where you can think of what can help you, such as ask them to prompt you in order to make sure you have answered the question to the point. Step 3. Creating a document with your reasonable adjustment request for an interview. So using the information we have thought about in step 2, we now need to put this in a document. We need to make sure that the document is specific to interviews, so it is written clearly and concisely what is needed. So if we take a look at an example here of a document for reasonable adjustments for an interview, we need to think about the structure, so the challenges that you find and what reasonable adjustments can be put in place and how they will help you and the importance of them. Step 4. Reasonable adjustments in the workplace. The first thing to do is to ask the employee for a meeting to ask for reasonable adjustments. And the second is to apply for access to work funding, either yourself or through the employer. It is important to take notes and confirm what is agreed. So keep copies of everything you send to your employer and access to work, and make notes of your conversation, including dates and times, what was said and who it was said by. And sending an email so that there's a record of your conversation, of your reasonable adjustments, is also important. So after you've had your conversation, send them a summary email and ask if this is accurate. So it's important to remember that it's never too late to ask for reasonable adjustments. And you might find that after being in a job for a few months, you find certain things challenging that you hadn't thought of. Then just arrange another meeting with your management to discuss more reasonable adjustments using the steps that we've talked about earlier. Step 5. Ironing out any issues. Following through with your reasonable adjustments is really important. And you might find that you requested these reasonable adjustments for the interview and in the workplace, but you have found that the message has not quite got through to the correct person. So it is really important to clarify and check that this information has been passed on to the relevant person. You might find that your reasonable adjustments have been agreed and you have found that they have not quite been implemented how you expected. Here it's important to have another meeting with your management or the relevant department and express your concerns that your reasonable adjustments have not been implemented how you would have liked and what you would like to be done about this. It could be that there has been misunderstanding or that the relevant person is not quite aware of what your specific challenges are. This is where it could be useful to then prompt again on what your challenges are and what can be done to help. Again, it is important to write this all up in a follow-up email to the relevant person who has dealt with your reasonable adjustments and to ask them for a timescale of when they expect these adjustments to be put in place. That way you have a timescale to refer back to. So these were your 5 steps into asking for reasonable adjustments. And hopefully by now you are more confident in knowing how to ask for them. We have now reached the end of this video guide on reasonable adjustments, and I hope by now you are much more confident in understanding what reasonable adjustments are and how these reasonable adjustments might help you both in the recruitment process and in the workplace. And I hope the examples that we have given have helped you to understand what reasonable adjustments you might ask for, and also how you can ask for these reasonable adjustments. And thank you for taking the time to listen, and if you would like any more information, please go on our website at www.enna.org or contact us with the email hello@enna.org. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope it was very